Hello friends, I'm so glad you could join me today because I've really had fun researching and preparing for this video and really hope you'll find this information both helpful and interesting. Our topic today is on how we can each create a custom eyeshadow palette that's the perfect palette for us. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Elise and I launched this channel to create a community for those of us who are over 50 so we can learn together what products do and don't work for us now. And as a makeup artist who specializes in helping those of us with mature skin, I also wanted to share makeup tips and techniques that can help with our particular challenges so we can go from good to gorgeous. So if this approach sounds interesting, I hope you'll subscribe before you leave today. And with that said, let's focus on today's topic. I think if we're totally honest, we'd probably admit that our eyeshadow palette purchases are usually triggered by one or two colors in the palette that just call our names. But what often happens, at least I know this happens for me, is that I'll frequently use that one color that I fell in love with along with a few others, but the remaining colors in the palette are either rarely used or totally ignored. So I often find myself daydreaming about having a perfect eyeshadow palette that contains every color I love in the perfect formula and which has a wonderful range of light to mid-tone to deep eyeshadow colors. In other words, one palette that could be my consistent go-to palette that I could always rely on to create a wide variety of looks that I really love. What really spurred my thinking about this was my purchase this past summer of the three incredibly beautiful eyeshadow palettes that comprise the Sydney Grace Temptalia collaboration. Sydney Grace eyeshadows are at the top of my list of favorite eyeshadow formulas. So when I first heard about this collaboration late last fall, I couldn't wait to see the three palettes that were set to be launched this past spring. I also vowed to myself that if there weren't an equal number of mattes to shimmers, or more mattes than shimmers, I would pass up the palettes. Well, even though there were far more shimmer and metallic eyeshadows than mattes in each of the three palettes, my resolve absolutely crumbled when I saw the stunning colors. I just could not resist purchasing all three palettes. Here's a look at all three of these palettes so you can see them all together. Christine Mielke, who's the founder of Temptalia and who chose these colors, shared why she arranged the colors in each of the three palettes the way she did and how the colors could coordinate together in some really detailed articles that she wrote in Temptalia. I loved having this insight into her thinking and really appreciated her sharing her vision of all the possible color combinations. But as someone who likes to ground my eyeshadow looks primarily in matte shades, I found myself having to go between all three palettes to get the matte looks that I wanted, since there were only 4 mattes in each of the three 12-pan palettes. That's what made me decide to create my own custom palette. And since I had so much fun doing it, I wanted to share with you the different ways that you can also create a custom palette that's just right for you. Basically, there are 3 ways to go about creating your own custom palette. First, you can purchase single eyeshadows like this one from Colourpop, and then you can put all your favorite colors together in an empty palette which can be purchased. There are many companies that make single shadows, and I've put a list in the description box of many of the companies that make really good single eyeshadows. The second way to create your own custom eyeshadow palette is to remove your favorite eyeshadows from palettes that you already have and place them together in an empty eyeshadow palette. And the third way is to combine the first 2 methods that I just mentioned by placing single shadows into palettes along with shadows that you've removed from other eyeshadow palettes. I use this last method to create my own custom eyeshadow palette, which includes all the mattes from the collaboration as well as one metallic eyeshadow. And by the way, there's also one Rogue Natasha Denona eyeshadow in it as well. I really love the palette I created, and it's made eyeshadow application so much easier since I no longer have to go back and forth between 3 different Sydney Grace eyeshadow palettes. My custom eyeshadow palette has all 12 Sydney Grace matte eyeshadows from the 3-palette collaboration between Sydney Grace and Temptalia, plus 10 additional matte single eyeshadows that I purchased this past summer during Sydney Grace's Christmas in July sale. And by the way, Sydney Grace will have another sale coming up this fall. I also purchased some small round stickers on Amazon so I could put the name of each color on the back of each eyeshadow and also indicate which palette it came from. I did this so it would be possible to put the eyeshadows back in their original palettes if I ever wanted to do so. And another reason I put the stickers on the back of each shadow was so if I wanted to use any of these eyeshadows in a future video, I'd be able to tell you the name of that particular shadow. As you'll see, I personally like to arrange my eyeshadows by color and then by light to dark within each color. And by the way, you'll be able to pick out the Rogue Natasha Denona eyeshadow because it's the only square-shaped pan in the entire palette. Here's what the palette looks like that I created. I plan to create a second customized palette that has all the Sydney Grace shimmers and metallics in it, again organized by color from light to dark. I was able to put this eyeshadow palette together because the eyeshadows are in metal pans and the empty palette that I purchased from Colourpop is magnetized, so all of the eyeshadows grip to the bottom of the empty pan and absolutely won't fall out. Any single eyeshadows that you have or might purchase in the future that are in metal containers will always attach easily to any magnetized palette. And these magnetized empty palettes can be purchased from a number of different vendors, including some vendors like Ulta, Colourpop, Walmart, Makeup Geek, or Z Palettes. And they also come in a number of different sizes, so they can hold anywhere from 9 to 48 eyeshadows. I'll put links to some of these magnetic palettes in the description box below. And if the individual eyeshadows are not in metal containers, no worries at all. It's possible to purchase round or square metal stickers which attach to the back of the individual eyeshadows so they'll adhere to a magnetized palette. There are a number of makeup companies that really make it easy for us to remove individual eyeshadows from the palettes that they make and put them in a separate magnetized palette. And bless them so much for doing so. It's possible to remove these individual eyeshadows from these palettes either because the companies make eyeshadows which are in metal containers and which come in magnetized palettes, or the companies make it easy to remove the individual eyeshadows from their palettes. These companies include Colourpop, Alter Ego, Kaleidos, Ofra, Natasha Denona, and the more recent Sydney Grace palettes. Let me show you how this works with a magnetized Colourpop palette as well as a Natasha Denona palette. These are the tools that I'll be using to remove individual eyeshadows from Colourpop palettes. A small rectangular magnet purchased from Home Depot, as well as some wax paper cut into small rectangles. The wax paper helps keep any eyeshadow powder from spilling out, which really saves cleanup time later. So let me go ahead and demonstrate how to remove these magnetized shadows. I'm going to be working with this Colourpop palette called Blue Moon, and here's what it looks like inside. So first I'm covering one particular eyeshadow with wax paper, and then I'm going to put the magnet over it and pull it out. I think you probably heard the click it made when the magnet attached to the magnetized eyeshadow pan. And as you can see, I can just pull it right out. So as you can see, using the wax paper over the eyeshadows really does help avoid any kind of powder coming out. Now let me show you how to remove individual eyeshadows from a Natasha Denona palette. The only tool that I'll need to do it is a paper clip that I've slightly pulled apart. On the back of most Natasha Denona palettes, you'll see a small hole under each eyeshadow. Let me show you. All you need to do is insert the paper clip up through the hole and you'll be able to push up the eyeshadow and take it out of the palette. Let me go ahead and demonstrate for you. I have Natasha Denona's Sunrise palette and I'm pushing up through the hole. And I hope you can see that that pushed the edge of the shadow up, and then I'll be easily able to pull that out with my fingers. But you might be wondering, how is it possible to remove individual eyeshadows from other makeup brands that don't make it so easy to remove their eyeshadows from their palettes? Well, a good example of a palette like this would be this cardboard eyeshadow palette from BH Cosmetics, which is absolutely beautiful, but which makes it very challenging to remove any of the eyeshadows from this particular palette. This is the Blueberry palette from BH Cosmetics. And the silver around each of the individual eyeshadow palettes is cardboard, which would need to be removed. But there are two ways that individual shadows can be removed from palettes like this. First, you could use an X-Acto knife like this one, and then you'd simply cut away the cardboard which surrounds the individual eyeshadow pans. Then you can usually go ahead and pull out each individual eyeshadow. But since you do ruin the packaging, I'm not going to go ahead and demonstrate this process. It does take some work and patience to take these palettes apart, but it is doable. And most likely, you'll also need some Q-tips and rubbing alcohol to get the glue off the back of each individual eyeshadow pan. You'll probably also need to purchase the round or square metal stickers that I mentioned earlier to put on the back of each individual eyeshadow so they can be put into an empty magnetized palette. The second way to remove individual eyeshadows from eyeshadow palettes like this BH Cosmetics palette is to invest in a really interesting device called a Z-Potter made by Z-Palette. Unlike a conventional hot plate that heats the entire surface to scalding hot temperatures, which melts the glue that holds each eyeshadow in the palette, the Z-Potter uses induction technology to only heat the metal pans. This means that it doesn't destroy the packaging or release the toxic fumes of melting plastic. It also saves fingers from painful burns. It's also a great tool which can be used by makeup artists to melt lipsticks so they can be put in small plastic cases like this one that are usually used by makeup artists. The Z-Potter device is expensive at $69, and as of right now, it's only available in the US, Canada, and Mexico. It probably isn't something most of us would invest in, but I at least wanted to let you know about it. I hope I've given you some inspiration today so you can have some fun creating your own custom eyeshadow palette. And I'd love to know in the comments section below if you have and love any single eyeshadows, and if so, the name of the shadow as well as the brand. Thank you so much for joining me today. And just a quick reminder that if you'd like to receive my weekly newsletter, all you need to do is drop me a quick email at boomerandbeyondbeauty@gmail.com to let me know. And if you know someone else who might enjoy today's video, I hope you'll feel free to share it with that person. Until next Thursday, I send you warm wishes for much health and happiness and wish you a really fabulous rest of your day. Take care.